Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to take a look at a set of watercolors that has been requested many times from you guys, and I recently had an Amazon gift card and I decided that I would splurge and order this set of 48 watercolors. This is by the company Mungyo, and I have been interested in this set of colors because I've been hearing requests from you guys for it for about the last year, but also because this company makes products for a lot of other companies. They make private label products. So if, say, I wanted to have my own set of color pencils or watercolor paints or what have you, I could call them up and say, hey, could you make me a set with these colors, put them in a case like this, and put my label on it, and they could do that. There are several companies that do that around the world. That's why sometimes you could order like a set of colored pencils from one company and end up with a very similar one from another company, almost identical. It's because many craft companies don't have the resources to, make everything from scratch. They have to order some things out. So I was really curious about this set, and I paid just under $50 for this on Amazon. And what you get is a standard black tin of 48 colors. This has the Mungyo name stamped on it, and I will say that on the listing on Amazon, I searched Mungyo Watercolors to find it, but it was listed as Sargent Art Watercolors. They make a lot of products for the Sargent brand, which is excellent student quality products, so no shame in that game. I just wanted to let you know that in case you are looking for those and you're seeing Sargent or some other name on it. Sometimes I think when they're listing stuff, the trade names get a little confused. So here we have our tin. I did make a little swatch card of this using my waffle flower stamps. I like to do that, and I like to swatch them in the order that I put them in. Sometimes I change it from the way they come, and that way I can see all of my colors at a glance, because oftentimes with watercolors, especially when you are looking at your palette, your dried paints, your paints are going to look a lot different than they do when you paint them out. They generally look a lot darker in the pans and a lot brighter on paper. So I like to make my little swatch there so I know what, like if I'm going for a red, I want to know what's going to be a pinky red, what's going to be like a crimson red, what's going to be a tomato red. I want to know what colors I have before me. This palette does stain a bit, which is fairly common with your metal tins. It is a nice white palette, not like the lavenderish gray one I got with my Artist Loft. No, not Artist Loft. The Master's Touch watercolors. This is nice and bright. This is what color started off as, and this is what it looks like after I've used it a few times. But you can use a magic eraser to clean that up really well, and it doesn't bother me. It doesn't really affect mixing if it's a little stained. So you can clean it up if you want, or you can just let it get stained until you can't stand it and clean it up then. All in all, I was really impressed with the paints. We're going to take a look at the swatches. What I did was I saved these were all wrapped. Each of these individual pans was wrapped. Which was a good sign, I thought, because when your pans are wrapped, I feel like if they've gone to that kind of trouble, then the paint's not going to be junk. So what I did was I just put down a few strips of double-sided tape, and I stuck the pans down as I unwrapped them and put them kind of in order, just so that when I went to swatch them, I would be sure I had the right label with the right color. Actually, their labels were pretty good matches. Not that that matters, and most people just toss those out. But the reason I didn't toss it out is because on the labels, there is lightfast information, so it goes on a 1 to 3 star system, 1 being the most fugitive, 3 being the most lightfast, and also it has your pigment information, like PR81. I won't be able to read these pigments from those labels. I have to have this like right up to my face to read that, but that information is there, which I think is really important. If you find yourself wanting to reference those pigment numbers a lot, what I would recommend you do is take a fine tip Sharpie and write it right on top of the swatch in a legible size number and letter, but I just wanted to make sure I had that information. So what I did was my common fare for swatching. I did a line of waterproof black permanent marker, let it dry for about 45 minutes, and then I did a kind of a gradiated wash, or fairly watery wash. Usually start kind of dark and then fade it down, let that dry completely, and then I do a stripe of color just to see if I can get a layer of glazing on there without it being without it lifting up. And also I do that so I can see how transparent or opaque the colors are, because if you're starting to water it down, by the time you get to that black line, it's not really that true. So looking through my reds and even my yellows, I was pretty impressed with the transparency. Most of the shades I found to be quite nice and vivid. As you get into the colors that clearly look like they have some white in them, you know, you do see a little bit of a muddiness. The metallics obviously have mica, so they're gonna bounce your light back. And I did see like this brown is a little more opaque. This gray obviously has white in it and it's a little opaque. The white's not very opaque at all. The white is more of like a softer white. It says that it's pigment white 6, but it's a very subtle white. It's definitely more for just diluting your color a little bit if you want a creamier shade and you don't, or you know, you just don't want it to be so vibrant. It's not going to really give you much opacity. And you get some beautiful earth tones here. So I was really impressed with it. I swatched it out and I was really loving these colors. When I did the same thing here when I swatched it, just put like a little black line before I did it. And I was pretty impressed. And some of the colors were a little more opaque, but that's kind of to be expected, especially with a more budget line of paints. Now, one of the reasons this has been requested so much is because people have guessed that that Mungyo makes the Prima watercolor confections, and then later on people guessed that Prima makes the Jane Davenport watercolors. Now, I happen to like both of those lines of watercolors, so I decided I would compare them and also get some information about the pigment makeups of those paints, and kind of compare and contrast and see what we got. So I had a little help from my friend Rich, the spin doctor. He is a chemist by trade, and he also happened to have all the information from Prima on the pigment information on their sets. I only have the first 5 sets that they put out, and I'm really only going to be looking at the first 3, because after that you got some very specialty colors that, that I don't think would be on here anyway, and I don't have them, so I can't swatch them out and eyeball compare them, so that wouldn't really be fair. But what I did was I swatched out the Prima watercolors here, and it's interesting, when I searched Mungyo watercolors on Amazon, I saw they actually had a pastel set that was identical to the Prima Pastel Dream set, except the Mungyo one was $50 for those 12 colors, and the Prima ones, they retail for like $30, and you can find them for as low as like, you know, $20 on Amazon. So I thought, wow, that's pretty sweet. The Prima ones are cheaper, and if your big box store obviously carries these Prima sets of 12, they retail for $30. You could get them for, you know, $15-20 if you had a coupon in the United States anyway. So I just wanted to throw that out there. This was $50. These sets of 12 or 30 each, but like I mentioned, coupons and all that jazz, you can pay way less. So looking at the first 3 sets here, I'm going to put away Shimmering Lights too, because those are all mica colors. They're all sparkly, so they're a little specialty. Looking at these 3 sets, I found that every color in the classics matched in color and in pigment makeup. I'm going to link up to Rich, the Spin Doctor's article on this, where he has all the pigment information that was supplied to him from Prima, so you can see for yourself. But I did compare all the pigment numbers that I got from his article, and then I even just went through and eyeballed it. I mean, you can see clearly that the colors that matched on the swatch are also matching here, and they're also matching in pigment numbers. Now, I didn't do the glazes on this. I just did a really quick swatch just so I'd have something to move around, and I wouldn't have a big sheet like this that I wouldn't be able to put colors next to each other. That one doesn't look like it matches quite as well, but I think maybe my brush was a little dirty from swatching so many colors, but I was really impressed with the matches. They all match by pigment number perfectly. So then the next one that I looked at was the tropicals, and I had all but one match by pigment number, and I had all but one match by color look. So where I was off, that green that was supposed to match, I think it was supposed to match one of these colors here. It didn't match by look, but it matched by pigment number. And the other color, there's one color that didn't match by, that matched by pigment number. Oh, the orange, it matched by look, but didn't match by pigment number. So this one had PO13, and this one had PO13 and another pigment, and I didn't think that this said it had another pigment in it, but it didn't seem to, it looked the same as that. So so pretty good. If you wanna be really hard on it, you could say it was 10 out of 12, but I would say 11 out of 12, just because one didn't look quite right to me, to my eyes anyway, on my swatches that I did, which of course human error could be at fault because I am a human. And then Decadent Pies, every color matched on Decadent Pies. I cross-referenced the pigment information from these labels and the pigment information supplied by Prima to the Spin Doctor on his article, and really good good matches. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So the reason I wanted to do this is not to out Prima as, oh my word, they don't make their paints in-house. Obviously not. I don't know of any craft companies that do. But it's more to say, if you've been collecting the Prima watercolors all these years, you're probably going to be disappointed because you're going to be buying duplicate colors. On the other hand, if you've been using the Primas and you love them and you're wearing them out, then this might be a cheaper option than going and rebuying all of the tins. You know, you can buy individual colors, which I really like through Prima, but if you didn't want to do that, or you've used everything up and you just wanted to get one set that would do it and save a little money, that would do the trick. So I mean, I'm not trying to say anything negative about Prima, Mungyo, anybody. I just wanted to put that information out there so that you can make the best choice for you. Now, another paint that seems to match really well, because she herself puts the pigment information on her website for everybody in the world to see, is the Jane Davenport palettes. Now, I happen to absolutely adore Jane and her products. I think they're so fun and whimsical, and they really encourage people to play with their supplies, and I love that, and I love these adorable tins. I didn't find as many matches with her newer set, so I didn't go try to hunt down pigment information, but I did have the information from these two sets, the neutrals and the brights, and this is I found these colors all within this set, but the thing that I liked was just the different way that it is laid out, because if you know anything about color theory, you know about warm and cool colors. So these are all, now I will stick in like random pans down the center of these channels. Both the Prima palettes and the Jane Davenport palettes have room to put the half pans right down the center like this, so I love that. Since this palette's all warm tones or warm versions of cool tones or all warm undertoned colors, I will sneak in a few like cool undertone colors there. So if I just want to take this and go out to paint for the day, I have a really well-rounded palette. So with these colors, her neutrals, they're all warm. So they're all going to be low-key colors. They're going to be easy to mix neutrals and skin tones and things like that. So these are warm colors. If you mix too many together, you're more likely to get hazy or muddy colors. Now her other original set are brights, and brights are cool. These brights are cool colors. So these all have cool undertones. So you can mix and mix and mix and mix and still stay out of the mud. So I like that she arranged her palettes in warm and cool colors. That's what companies can do when they, and I'm not accusing these guys of private labeling through, I have no idea, absolutely with no certainty where they get their supplies, but this is just my prediction. So I was able to find, matched by pigment numbers and the way the colors looked, all of the brights in the Jane Davenport Brights palette here. I could find all of the neutrals by look and pigment number here. So I thought that was really really interesting and fun. And then I did take a look at the Sieglitz palette, and it seems like all except for this almost lemony cool yellow and this gold. There is a gold here, but this gold seems a little bit cooler than the gold there. That gold seems a little bit more white, and this gold seems a little bit more yellow. But the other colors, by sight, they look very similar to the colors that were in the Sieglitz palette, which had a lot of greens in it for some reason. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. By pigment numbers from Jane Davenport's website, all of these match the pigment numbers that look the same on this Mungyo watercolor set. So again, if you wanted to have a larger variety of colors than what you can get in, say, her first two sets, you could get that larger set and go from there. The downside to having a big set, though, would be that it can be easy to get confused between all of the colors. So if you are trying to do a painting using 5 colors out of here and you go to grab your blue, well, what blue did I get? I've got like 8 blues here. Which one was it? Or you go to grab your red and you're like, oh, was it that one or this one? So it can be kind of confusing and difficult to tell. Also, I like how the warm and cool colors are separated in these palettes. And for the case of Prima, if you've ever seen any of their design team watercolorists, they will take one set and make beautiful paintings kind of with the feel of each set. Like, I love Decadent Pies for painting outdoors. It's got a gorgeous landscape feel to it. The tropicals are a great mixing set. The classics I don't really care for that much, to be honest. I haven't used shimmering lights very much, but seeing it all swatched out, I actually feel like I ought to grab them and use them a little bit more. And the pastel dreams are so fun for doing some florals, macaroons, and mixing with the other sets. So the nice thing about Prima is they kind of group everything into a certain theme or feel. So it's really easy to kind of coordinate your colors if you don't feel you're very confident with mixing colors. They have, especially their newer sets are very thematic. So there's like Essence and Woodlands and is it Moroccan or Odyssey or something? It's got a very Moroccan feel to it. So you can kind of group your colors by the feeling that you're trying to achieve with them. And that's, if it makes it easier for you to paint, take some of the guesswork out and get brushed to paper, I am all for it. So if you like the quality of those paints, they're all very similar, and I think that you would enjoy the set of 48. But if you have all of these already, you probably will feel kind of bummed out because you're like buying the same thing again, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because I've had so many requests for a review for this, and I know so many of you guys have these paints already, the Primas and the Jane Davenports. I don't want you to buy the same thing twice unless you want to, unless you know what you want, and that is that. So I did some mixing from the set of 48. I'm sorry this is so long, but because so many people requested it, and that was kind of the rumor going around, is that Mungyo makes the Prima and Jane Davenport watercolors. I just wanted to get that out there and really kind of go over it a little thoroughly, and no shade to anyone because I like them all. So I did some mixing with these colors, and in 2 color mixing tests, I was very impressed. I decided to take these kind of neon colors. I'll just kind of point them out to you. I used this kind of lemony, bright yellow, this kind of baby disco-y blue, and this neon opera color, and they mix quite well. Now, these colors are probably going to fade. I'd have to look at the actually the pink is the only one that's really fugitive out of those. So I wanted to mix those and see how they mix, because I thought they might have quite a bit of white in them and they might get muddy and hazy, but that wasn't really the case. I got some nice grays and colors from the cool, mixing cool colors. I mixed the warm primaries. Like, these would be like the primaries that would be in the Jane Davenport warm palette. Got gorgeous brown, got some really nice secondary colors. And then for fun, I mixed some neutrals. I decided to go with these kind of like plum, gold, and not like shiny gold, but like a golden color, and this kind of hunter green color. I got some really interesting muted shades that I thought were really pretty. I used this muted palette just to see how it would look, and I like that as well. And then I used just some kind of oddball, not quite primary colors, and got some interesting results there. The middle part was done by taking the 3 primaries together and mixing them to see what I got. And I didn't really notice a lot of gunk, like a lot of haze or mud, which was good. These colors are still pretty saturated. Now, I do want to get into some actual paintings that I did with these paints. I'm just going to bring this right over here. So on a live stream, the first time I used these, I painted this car on a live stream, and it was a very muted palette. I used the palette, a 3-color palette. I used rose madder, yellow ochre, and Prussian blue, and it got me a nice arrangement of muted colors that were perfect for this old vintage rusty old truck, a car hood. So I was pretty pleased with how that came out, but I really wanted to do some more brights. Here I just did some doodly roses just to see kind of how the colors layered and if they stayed bright. I do notice a shift, quite a shift from wet to dry with these paints. So when I was painting these, they look so much brighter, and when they dried, they really do dull out. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're painting. You might want to go a little brighter with your colors, go a little heavier with a color, because it is going to lighten. And I just posted a tutorial on this painting today. The thing that I like is I like the texture in the paints, which really reminds me of Prima. When you see some of their artists on Instagram, they have a couple really talented floral painters. There is I'm going to mispronounce her name, I'm afraid. Jollypoa, Jollypoa on Instagram. She's on YouTube too. Beautiful, beautiful florals. And Esther Peck. And I love just watching the paint granulate and just flow when they paint with them. It's just gorgeous, and I definitely see that here with these paints. I think if you're doing something with a lot of neutral colors, like the slice of pie here, the paints work really well. I didn't have any problem layering these, but I was working in some pretty light washes, and I wasn't doing anything too complex. When I was working on this painting though, I did notice some issues layering, especially like layering over this orange. When I'd go to scrub out some color, lift up some colors so that I could have a highlight, I noticed the color wanted to lift up a little too easily, and it, like, as soon as I went over it with a brush, it was like all just reactivating all of the color. It's like the color wasn't seeping into the paper. And this is all cotton paper that I've been using here. So it's not like a cheap paper by any stretch of the imagination. This is like 300 pounds. I didn't realize this was 300-pound paper when I was using it on the block, or I might not have used it for a watercolor test. But you know, I really like the texture when you mix two pigments of this color. The pigments, and it might not be, it's probably not the mark of the best paint that it does this, but I like it when the colors kind of separate a little bit in a really juicy wash. I like the look of that. I think it makes your shadows more interesting and your backgrounds more interesting. But the downside with this is that those larger pigment particles, they tend to sit on top of the paper and not soak in. So if you are trying to do a watercolor painting from start to finish and not do mixed media, not layer it with other medias, when you start to go over with another layer of color, it wants to lift up what's underneath unless you're doing a dry brushing technique. So that can be very frustrating. If you were, say, getting these Jane Davenport paints and you were painting a whimsical art journal face, chances are you're doing your washes in watercolor and then you're using pastels or color pencils or markers or other things on top. So you just want some gorgeous color and you just want to lay it down and have it really smooth and consistent, which is what you're going to get with this. But if you want to do a painting where you're doing a lot of layering, like maybe you're doing a botanical and you want to put like maybe 5 or 6 layers down, the layers will, if the layers do lay on top of each other, they're going to get chalky after probably 3 layers, and if you're not careful, you're going to lift up what's underneath. So not the best for layering. Gorgeous smooth colors, you can get granulation if you use it really juicy and you let that paint kind of settle, like just kind of sit and leave it alone, let it settle. But they're not the best for layering. So I really wanted to get that out there, because if you are getting into painting and you are looking to layer and do botanical work, I think this paint is not going to help you achieve the results that you want to get. If you want a lot of gorgeous color that leaps onto the brush as soon as you touch it with a wet paintbrush, this is the stuff for you. It's pretty inexpensive for how many colors you get, and I think it comes with a really nice range of colors in this 48 color set. 2 color mixes, I didn't notice any haze or a mud. I think if you're going to go 3-4 color mixes, you are going to get some mud, and that's, I mean, you can get mud with any paint, whether it's really expensive or inexpensive. However, if you're using more pure, more finely ground, more transparent paints, you're going to go a lot further before you run into any mud problems. But with a 2 color mix, even these ones that are pretty muddy and neutral to begin with, I still got decent mixes from them. So probably what I would recommend if you're a beginner is, maybe if you're going to do a painting, maybe remove this tray, put some magnets on the back of your palette, on the back of a few pans, and just pull out the couple colors you're working with so you don't get overwhelmed. Well, something I like to do is take a ceramic plate and take a little poster putty and stick it on the bottom of the pans, and just stick those 4 or 5 pans I need onto my ceramic plate and paint from that, especially if I'm teaching, so I don't get confused and grab the wrong color or confuse my students. So that's something you can do. I also noticed the texture on these pans, which is something I noticed in the Prima and the Jane Davenport pans itself. The texture, it's got a little bit of like of a gritty texture across the top. I didn't notice any of this grit getting like as part of the paint, just the texture on the pan. Because, you know, like I can look at a pan of Schminke paint, like, and just tell that's Schminke paint. I can look at a pan of Winsor & Newton, like, oh, that's a Winsor & Newton pan. You know, you just get so familiar with the textures of the pans if you've been painting watercolors for a long time. I've been painting watercolors since I was 7. So that's a lot of years. You don't need to do the math and let me know. I don't know. You don't need to. But it's been many years, many decades. And you just get to know the paints and the texture of them. And I did notice a similarity between these paints and a lot of the kind of newer, hip, trendy craft paints that are coming out on the market. And I think they made a wise choice. If they had Mungyo make their paints, which it would seem to be that's the case for a lot of these companies, I think they made an excellent choice. But these are, I would definitely call these a student grade or craft grade level of paints. I would definitely put them kind of like in the realm of Cotman, although I would say Cotman gets a couple extra points and Grombacher gets a couple extra points for using pigments that are a little bit more stable and less likely to fade if you're going to paint your work and hang it up. I don't find Cotman to be as bright as these, but I do find them to be more transparent and a little less chalky. Chalky is the wrong word. It's just once you get a few layers, like with this brown green color, you can't even see the line there. I don't know if you'd be able to see anyway with just a camera lens versus having it right in your hands to look at. But you know, you definitely will get a certain bit of sedimentation when you're doing any complex mixes, which I personally don't seem to get with Cotman paints. Cotmans are also a lot easier to find, so that also gives them a little more points in my book, because I can tell somebody go get, you know, a tube of burnt umber Cotman paint, and I know that 95% of my viewers can find that pretty in their home country and without a lot of expense. But these are going to be a little bit more tricky to find, and you know, yeah, I just wanted to, you know, put that out there. Plus, since these are kind of hard to find and you don't necessarily know what you're getting if you're ordering online, you know, it's like you can go to the store and pick it up and look at it and look at a hand-painted swatch card. So I try to bring that as much as possible so you can decide whether they're for you or not. Honestly, for me, because I have the Jane Davenport paints and the Prima paints, which I really enjoy, this is kind of all duplicated product for me. Granted, there are some colors that aren't in there, but not really a lot. So I probably should have just stuck with these, but I was really curious, and I think they're a decent paint. I definitely would bring them out, like if my kids wanted to do some painting, or I just didn't feel like having all these small little tins around and I wanted to paint with these paints, because these are really nice for doing wet into wet painting, doing loose florals, stuff like that, where you're not going to do a lot of layer, but you want to have like gobs and gobs of juicy paint ready to go at a second's notice. These are great. There's no digging in the pans like you have to with Cotman to get it like a big juicy wash. It's there. So doing plein air landscapes, doing you know, loose florals, doing, you know, the wet into wet roses, doing any of those techniques are going to be really fun with these paints and ideal. But if you're doing, because the paints have a nice texture when you're painting with them, they kind of have this beautiful texture, you know, to them just in their washes because of the pigment particles just kind of setting and settling into the paper. But if I was going to do like a botanical rose, or I wanted to put layers down, this would not be the best paint for that. I definitely want to go with a more high-end artist quality paint. So the set of 48 is $50. If you're not sure, I would highly recommend picking up one of the smaller sets, whatever color palette you find the most appealing, and try that first. Use the paints for a while, see if you really like them, and then maybe, you know, upgrading to this bigger set if you find that you really like the paints. If you kind of find, well, they're fun, but they're not going to be as versatile as other paints, then maybe hold out until you can afford like a better artist set. But I mean, for the money, I give them, you know, probably 8 out of 10 stars, maybe even 9 out of 10 stars. I wish they were a little cheaper, honestly, but I think they're definitely a good value, especially when I happily paid. You know, I got these at Michael's with a coupon when they first came out, these first 2 paint sets, and I happily paid like I think $16-17 for these. So per pan, you know, those were a little cheaper, but I really like them. I had a lot of fun with them, and yeah, I think you would too, but I just wanted to make sure that you had all the information. Did I explain myself enough? My gosh, I felt like I gave like 25 disclaimers in this. If you have any questions on any of these paints, just let me know in the comments below. I do have reviews of the Prima paints and the Jane Davenport paints on my channel, and I'll try to remember to either link them with an iCard in the corner of the screen, or or down below in the video description. They'll probably just pop up next to the video anyway, and then you can kind of get overwhelmed with information and probably will have more of a hard time deciding what you want to buy. But hey, I did this request because it was requested, and I enjoyed it. It was fun, and I think these paints are good for the money. But you just gotta make sure that it's going to be the best way you spend your money. You know, considering what your needs are and what you want to achieve with your paints. And let me tell you, I am probably a little more critical of paint than a lot of reviewers, because I've used so many, and those tiny little nitpicky differences I'm picking up on between like this paint and Cotman or Grombacher Academy or Schminke or whatever, it's because love watercolors, and I love seeing the differences between the paints, and I will pick a different palette based on what my mood is and what I'm painting. So some of this stuff wouldn't even register, it wouldn't even be an issue, I'm sure, but something I noticed, and I just want to be as thorough as possible. That's why we have a 30-minute watercolor review on this, which is probably a bit excessive. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If you like these reviews, please give me a thumbs up. You can let me know in the comments below what you think, or if there's any other products you'd like to see a review on. And until next time, happy crafting.